Hello dear pedagogy students, and welcome to one more of our videos in the how-to series. Today we are going to deal with one of the most difficult topics for me in regards to English language teaching, and it is teaching grammar. The images you'll be seeing in this video are from a poster donated by Alejandro Alvarado, Valerie Rojas, and Wilson Silva. They made a presentation for Sandra's class, Linguistics, on how to teach grammar, and they very kindly donated this poster for us to use in this presentation. So a shout out to them and thank you very much. Okay, let's get started. As I mentioned, they made a poster, they made an infographic about a lecture on teaching grammar by Betty Azar, Keith Falls, and Michael Swan. If you are interested in accessing the full lecture and watching the complete video and hearing the experts talk about grammar, not me, then you can scan the QR code that you see right here. Just have a QR code reader on your phone and scan it, and so you can see the video by yourself. It has two parts, so here you would just have part one. Okay, you would need to find the second one. So before we start with the information from the video, there are a couple of points that I would like to make about the teaching of grammar. One of them is that there is always a three-dimensional grammar framework presented by Diane Larsen Freeman, and this framework has inspired many teachers around the globe in their way to teach grammar. So what is that three-dimensional framework, or what are those three dimensions? Well, as you can see on the figure, we have the form or structure, we have meaning or semantics, and we have use of pragmatics. So there is something pretty important, that is, if you notice, most of the classes in our Colombian context just rely on form and structure. We do not go outside of the form. Maybe sometimes we go into the lexical meaning or grammatical meaning of things. So we use the simple present tense for routines, or we use the simple present tense to express X and Y. But we fall short into the use or the pragmatics part of the language teaching. So any grammatical tense that we decide to tackle is going to have a meaning and is going to have a function or pragmatic use. So it is important for you to notice and to pay attention, for example, to your textbook or to your curriculum, to see if you are attacking the three of these aspects, or if you're just falling on the morphosyntactic and lexical patterns of the grammatical structure. There are different ways of teaching grammar, and they are going to vary according to the educator. There is, for example, learning through writing. There are some people that think that just having students write a lot and analyze grammar patterns from the writings is going to be enough. There are other people that prefer inductive teaching. That is when you present a massive amount of examples, and out of the examples you try to extract the grammar structure. Anyway, we are focusing on form in that sense. Then we have deductive teaching, which is based on the opposite. We wouldn't give students examples, but we would provide them with an explanation of the grammatical structure, and would then, from the explanation of the grammatical structure, generate the examples. We have interactive teaching, which basically refers to games, so teaching grammar through play and creative games. Some teachers say that's a compliment, other teachers say that's just the way to go. And then we have guided discovery. Guided discovery is another way in which, through context, you present the grammatical structure by means of a video or a text or a story, and then you have your students discover the grammar from there. Some people would say that grammar discovery is a form of inductive teaching. Which one of these grammatical or grammar teaching ways are you going to choose? Well, it will depend on your beliefs, and also it will depend on the place where you work, because each place has a distinct grammatical model, and it depends also on the method. So for example, guided discovery, inductive teaching, learning through writing, and interactive teaching, they play very well with the communicative approach. So if you work at a place where communication is key, then one of these grammar methods is going to be better used. I encourage you and invite you to find a little bit more about each one of these grammatical ways to teach, or ways to teach grammar, either through videos on YouTube or through books. Okay, so let's get started with Valerie, Alejandra, and Wilson's poster. They presented a poster where, as I mentioned before, it was 3 teachers discussing, Betty Azar, Kit Falls, and Michael Swan. And there is something important, which is the concept. They do mention that grammar is the glue that holds a language together. Grammar affects all areas of English language learning, from writing to speaking to reading to listening. Not only these authors, many authors talk about grammar as the glue, because remember that we are, for example, foreign language learners or speakers. We know a lot about the meta language of grammar. Meta language is the grammatical names of things. But sometimes people, like in ESL contexts, they might not know all the meta language for this. Once again, going back to ESL and EFL, it's really important to know that it depends on which context we are, the way we're going to teach grammar. So in ESL, English as a second language refers to students who are learning English in an English-speaking country. We actually had this discussion during our bilingualism week. Then we have the EFL, English as a foreign language, refers to students who are learning English in a country where English is not spoken. So Colombia is one example of an EFL context. Anyway, regardless of whether it is an ESL or an EFL context, we have our students are called English language learners, or ELLs. You're going to find this term in many different places in the literature. So English language learners vary in many ways: in setting, learner age, curriculum, learner's objective. So it depends. The setting is the ESL, EFL, so we would change the way. For example, in EFL contexts, our students are mostly adults who have a structure for their first language, and they claim the structure for the second as well. That's the argument of some teachers for teaching so much grammar. They say that students actually want to learn all the structures. Then we have learner age. If we have young learners, for example, we're not going to teach grammar explicitly. That is out of the question. We have to teach grammar through stories, songs, chants, rhymes, etc. So if we do that with young learners, why don't we do it with adults? That would be a question to ask. We have curriculum. It also, what I mentioned before, some curriculums, especially the ones that don't know much about language learning or teaching, are going to be based on grammar teaching. So you're going to find an entire curriculum depending on some grammatical structures. And that's how the teacher walks in the classroom. Today we're going to work with a simple present. That couldn't be any more wrong if you ask me. Yeah. And then we have learner objectives. So for example, if the objective of my learners is to learn English in order to travel, they're going to have a different perception than if they are, for example, going to take an exam. So the way or the objective that students have in order to learn is going to change dramatically the way that they approach the grammar learning. So the big question that we have here, and it called my attention because it's a question that I've been asking myself for the 16 years that I've taught, is to teach or not to teach grammar, you know? To teach or not to teach it. So this is a big question for me, and that's why, for example, I decided to flip the grammar component in my courses. However, I realized that there are some implications to that, and that I have to be more coherent with the way of using the 3 different dimensions of grammar in my videos, for instance, but that's another discussion. So we are going to walk through 8 scenarios, as Wilson pointed out very clearly. There are 8 scenarios in which grammar teaching gains importance. So the first scenario is an ELL grammar teacher. The second scenario is the composition teacher. The third scenario is judging the readability of texts. The fourth scenario is K-12 and other non-ELL content teachers. The fifth scenario is observing the growth of students' language. Sixth scenario, answering ELL questions. Seventh scenario, an inquisitive teacher. And eighth scenario, the ELL teacher. Something important, a big disclaimer here is I am doing this video based on my prior knowledge of grammar teaching and also on the presentation that I attended. But if you want to hear the specificities of each one of these scenarios by the authors, please by all means go and watch the original lecture. So, the first scenario is an ELL grammar teacher. The example that our classmates had there was the success of teaching grammar depends on how well you know ELL grammar and how knowledgeable you are to develop grammar in your students. So what does this say about us? If we are language teachers, but we don't know the grammar, we are not going to be able to teach it to our students. So we have to know it first. And to know it first doesn't mean that we have to know a lot of meta language related to grammar. Probably our students are expecting us to, but it is important to know the intricacies, to be able to solve questions. And for that, we need to read a lot, and we need to know about grammatical structures and features and tenses and all these things. So the success of grammar teaching depends on you knowing the grammar. The second scenario is the composition teacher. Remember that we said that one of the ways to learn grammar can be through writing? Okay, so here we have composition teachers have to be familiar with ELL grammar in order to improve English proficiency and writing skills. So if you decide to teach grammar through your writing courses or through your writing tasks, then it's very important to know both the writing mechanics, but also to know grammatical tenses and grammatical structures, and once again, the whole deal about grammar. The third scenario is judging the readability of texts. How do you know whether a passage of book is the right level for your ELLs? So let's say that you were reading a book, or you are going to assign a book to your students. How do you know that the level of that book is what your students need and what they can handle? Well, by knowing all the grammar that, they are supposed to know at certain levels. This is another problem. Sometimes students have difficulties because their teachers are either expecting too much or too little of them. So for this, I encourage you to read the Common European Framework and to find a grammatical competence. The grammatical competence is part of the linguistic competence. And within the grammatical competence, you are going to learn what your students need to know and need to be able to do with the grammar. Not only the labels, as it says here in the picture by our classmates. Grammar teaching is not students learning grammatical labels. Yeah, your students might know present perfect, simple past, but they don't know how to use it. They don't know in what situations to choose it. So it is important that they know everything altogether. The fourth scenario is K-12 and non-ELL content teachers. So how can you make your language more comprehensible? Slowing down the rate of speech, raising the voice on key ideas, using easier grammar structures and vocabulary. This we are going to see in the third term when we talk about SIOP, CLIL, and content-based instruction, because we have that situation in Colombia. We are teaching the language through the content. So we have to grade or vary the level that we use in order to be able to help students process the content, but also understand the language. Fifth scenario, observing the growth on students' language. So when specific language structures have been produced correctly, the errors in an ELL's into language reflect language growth. Have you noticed how you started to generalize things? Overgeneralized rules. So like you started duplicating every letter before putting an ing. Well, that's because you overgeneralize the rule because you're learning it. So this is something that happens with ELLs, and we have to pay close attention. We have to observe to see how to help them continue improving in their language. The sixth scenario proposed is the answering ELL's questions. So there was a question from the audience, and it is like, should we answer all the students' questions? Now, that's something that I ask you. What should we do? Should we answer every single student's question? Well, probably not. Probably yes. It depends. Actually, I don't like to answer all my students' questions. I like to send them to find some answers. You know that. So learning occurs when a question comes from our students. Why would we provide all the answers if it's more meaningful if they find them by themselves? Seventh scenario, an inquisitive teacher. Teachers are always trying to come up with better ways to teach ELL grammar. So for example, what I told you, I am not convinced about grammar teaching, so I go for flipping. Flipping is the way for me to go, because I realized the regular grammar teaching was not working for me. What is going to happen for you? The eighth scenario is an ELL teacher. So knowledge of these issues makes you able to help students improve proficiency in English. It is very important that as a teacher, as a foreign language teacher, you practice, you learn, you find the grammar for yourself. So as you can see, this topic is pretty hard. How to do it? Well, there is not a magic formula. There's not a magic wand that can tell you how. You can do some more reading, actually. The video time is over, so I have to stop here, but we can continue this discussion in class. See ya!